this is always the question of money is always uh, is always the issue. Always, how are we funding our organizations? Where is the money coming from? Is it coming from within the countries? Is it through entrepreneurial activities of the organization? Is it through multilateral partners, development partners? What is the funding source? I wanted to start this conversation today by starting from Cameroon, where we are. We're talking about the Central Africa region, but I wanted to start from Cameroon. So I wanted to start with you, Dr. Wilson, as the Chief Research Officer at the Ministry of Scientific and Technical Research here in Cameroon. Could you just set the stage for us regarding research and funding, the way you see it from the ministry and the way you see it in Cameroon?
Okay, thank you so much for, I hope this guy is working.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for this exchange and the opportunity that you're giving us from the Ministry of Scientific Research to express our stand on this issue of funding of research. The think tank that we're talking about, brings ideas, and these ideas need to be complemented with finances, because for any development, if you have ideas and you don't have capital, there's going to be a stalemate, and the other way around. We just want to say that the funding of research in Cameroon and in Central Africa in general has a big problem. And the problem is stemming from the fact that research is not considered as a sovereign activity. So most of 80% of funds of research comes from external sources. I think it is inadmissible that you have your house and then you leave your house and get a stranger to come in to run the house, because as it is said, when you allow somebody to beat the drum, he is going to determine your dance step. Now, 80% of funding comes from international organizations. And we think that this has to be reversed. We have to think out and do things in order to reverse this pattern and these trends. If we get to become autonomous, as Professor Pondi, insisted yesterday, then we are laying a better ground for the future of funding research in this country by our own budget. I want to recollect a fact that in 1980, there was a legal framework that was put in place in Lagos, the Lagos Plan of Action, that 1% of every country's budget should be allocated for research. In 2024, the entire budget for Cameroon, I think, was about 7,000 billion. If my arithmetic is right, 1% of that amount is about 7 billion. If we take 7 billion for research, there was a research that we did at the Institute of Research for Geology and Mining in 2015, sponsored by the Japanese government, and we spent 2 billion CFA. So you realize that if we are taking 7 billion for research for an entire country, is Mickey Mouse. And even for that 1% to be reached in Africa, let me not talk of Central Africa, the only countries that went close to this 1% were South Africa and Malawi, who touched about 0.8%, not up to 1. Cameroon did not even have any comprehensive data, so they didn't even feature in that classification. But when I did the classification by the calculation by myself, I realized that we were at about 0.03.
Oh, 0.03.
It's really deplorable.
Hmm.
So we're going to continue with the discussion. Thank
Yes. So the funding from a Cameroonian perspective is very limited. Now, let me just stay with you for 1 minute. What about a little bit on the challenges that researchers in the country face? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Yeah, the challenges are really many, but I think the first is the fact that there is this limited funding. Mm-hmm. Because without funds, you can't do, adequate research. That's the first thing. So then the second challenge is, I will give the second challenge by saying that, there is this issue of equality between researchers in the sub-region, researchers in Africa, and our external partners. I'd love that the ambassador be here to hear me say this, but unfortunately he had to leave for other things. There is a publication in Nature, which was published in 2015. Nature is a top, journal in the world, published by Nordins in 2015, stating that African researchers are seeking for equality. And what is this equality we're talking about? The equality is that when these funds are coming from external sources, the external partners come with their priorities, which is very different from what we have. So the global north, they have the resources, they come with their money to the global south, and at the end of it, the researchers in Cameroon turn out to be data collectors. They are not considered as researchers. And even when publications are done, you need to fight to make sure that your name goes into a position that is recognized. So this comes back into our independence. We need to fight and be autonomous. So it's a very big problem that researchers are facing in Cameroon and the Central Region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a question. It's an issue that we hear a lot, which, personally, I always say, if we had our own money, we would be selective, in what you. I mean, we are still selective now, but if you funded your research, if you had strong research centers, which I'll bring, would take me to Dr. Marie Glorious regarding having strong research centers. You have IDRC, which coordinates, is the International Development Research Center for the Canadian government. So it's a very old institution, has been there for a while. Dr. Marie Glorious, you lead IDRC for Central Africa and all of West Africa, at least 24 countries, that you support as far as the research, and some countries you have bilateral agreements with, like Cameroon, for example, you have bilateral agreements with Cameroon. Could you start by just telling us how you go about defining research priorities and areas of engagement, and thirdly, how you interact with organizations or researchers that you get to work with?
Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking you and the Nkafu Policy Institute for allowing and inviting IDRC to be part of this great forum. So maybe just if you also allow me briefly to let you know, especially people who don't know about IDRC, which is the International Development Research Center created in 1970 by the Canadian Parliament. And the idea behind it was that it's impossible almost to have really proper development if you don't have research capacity. So the mandate of IDRC was to support research for development in low and middle income countries. So in terms of your question about how we define the funding priorities, I will give you an example of the current strategy that we have. It's a strategy over 10 years, from 2020 to 2030. And before that strategy was developed, IDRC, in addition to the office in Ottawa, we do have 5 other regional offices. So regional office in Latin America and the Caribbean, a regional office for Asia, regional office for Middle East and North Africa, and regional office for East and Southern Africa, as well as the regional office of Central and West Africa. So we conducted consultations. So we went out from previous partners plus also others, and we engaged them around what are the issues, not only current issues they were seeing, but also what may be emerging, because we were thinking about a strategy over 10 years. And why 10 years before we had usually 5? Because we thought that if we invest, it has to be a long-term investment. It can't be just every 2 or 3 years. So that engagement really helped us to define the broad areas of investment. And they are broad. So in that strategy, currently we have 5 pillars. We have a pillar on global health. We have a pillar on democratic, inclusive governance. We have a pillar on sustainable, inclusive economies. We have a pillar on education and science, as well as a pillar on the climate resilient food systems. So those were areas that were that emerged from the consultation that IDRC now has as part of our strategy. And how do we engage with our research partners? Again, from the mission, from the mandate we had from the beginning when IDRC was established, the idea is that it's when you want to address development issues, you have to trust that those that are living issues are the best one, better positioned to also provide the solutions. So that's why IDRC has been always engaging with our partners in low and middle income countries, and the funding goes directly to our partners in the South. Yes, there could be collaboration with northern institutions. That's not excluded. But again, when it's done, we make sure, and we're very, very attentive to the issue of power. Because I think someone was talking about the partnership and how you can have equitable partnership. I'm sure probably Enrique will be talking about that. But it's important to make sure that who received the funds, who managed the funds, really are the organizations that are understanding the issues, are going to implement the activities, and finding the solutions. I hope I addressed your couple of questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I think it's very special with IDRC almost taking the lead in funding organizations directly. That is a point that there are very few development agencies around the world who actually fund directly the researchers in the countries or in the region. So that is something that's extremely important that IDRC does, and it allows that the whole issue of capacity is is boosted for these countries. Kike, Dr. Enrique, I want to come to you.
Not a doctor.
You wanted to be one time?
No.
No. No. All right. Enrique, you have a long history. First, working in a think tank, ODI, for a while in London, and then running for 15 years now on think tanks. That you've really worked to communicate what think tanks are, what they do, how they do it, the challenges they face. You support and advise a lot of funders, IDRC one, and many other funders regarding how to fund civil society organizations, and what should be their priorities, and what mechanisms they should use. When you look at the issue of funding, from all the years in the sector, the issue of funding to the current issues of the day, where do we stand as far as funding from your standpoint? Looking at it globally, then looking at it from the African perspective, and the lessons that you're learning. So it's a broad question to you.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you for having me and having on think tanks here. And is it this? Okay. And I want to make sure that you're all welcome to explore the On Think Tanks platform and the various services. And if any of you have any questions or interests, just get in touch with me. I'm easy to find online, and I always try to respond. Especially young think tankers. We have a program where we are supporting university-led think tanks. So if there are any universities who have or want to set up a think tank, I'm always keen to work with you. I think some of the discussion around the context has been presented already just now and yesterday. I'm going to generalize because of time, but I would argue that in high income countries or higher income countries, you're more likely to find think tanks that are domestically funded. In higher income countries, you're more likely to find think tanks that are core funded or at least programmatic funded, right? So they're not funded for a specific project or specific output. And you're also more likely to fund think tanks that are funded in what I would call a proactive mode, so where the think tank talks to the funder and says, hey, give us money to do what we want to do. In lower income countries, lower income countries, we find the opposite. We find that think tanks are more likely to be funded by international development organizations, so from outside of their own country, that they're more likely to be funded for projects, short-term projects, and also they're more likely to be funded in a reactive way. Is where the funder says, okay, this is our program, call for proposals, and then you have to submit a proposal using their terms, their concept note, their budget template, etc., to address their issues. I think this could be solved in a couple of ways, right? So, or a few ways. One is by funders, when we're talking about Central Africa, by funders, especially international development funders, who fund think tanks in this region, doing things slightly different, right? So, trying to avoid this approach of, I put out a call and I get your proposals, but reaching out to organizations and investing in individuals and organizations over the long time. Mm-hmm. So it's more the think tank saying, this is what we think is important, and then they're setting the agenda. Another way, of course, is for funders the funders to change, right? For Central Africa, as I am from Peru, and I would say for Peruvian think tanks, to find a way to not be funded by or not be reliant on foreign funding. And I think this calls, and we can talk about that, I think there's a question later, we can talk about that, but this calls for a bit of collective action from the think tank community to, as the keynote speaker from yesterday, Professor Fonti, right, said, it requires a concerted effort, right? You have to stop asking for the money and mobilizing your own funds. And I say this as a Peruvian, when we complain in Peru that international funders are establishing rules that do not work in our advantage, I said, well, I feel, well, but we've got the money. What do we expect? Well, what do you expect the U.S. government or the British government or a foundation in Germany? I mean, they're going to be thinking from their point of view, right? I mean, they can be nice and give us more freedom to use those funds, but they have their own limits. And then there are things that I think think tanks themselves need to do to address the challenge, right? The challenge of the kind of funding they're getting today, and the fact that most of that funding is not coming from domestic sources. And if I can go through some of these, which I think speak about the current context in I'd say most lower middle income countries, global south, however you want to call it. So one of those is that I think the odds are against you when it comes to international development funding sources. So in a recent study we did for a group of global foundations, global funders on education in Africa, so global funders who are funding research on education in Africa, right, about Africa, we found that although they give, that this group of funders, there's about 15 funders, they give 50% of their grants go to African organizations, 80% of the grant value, so the amount of dollars, goes to US-based organizations. And so the odds are against local organizations like yours. So I think one thing we need to do is we're going to have to be relentless about changing this. It's not going to happen because we say, well, that's bad, or because we present them with evidence. The other one is to be proactive. As I said, it's more likely for a northern think tank doing research in Africa to get proactive funding, right, than for a research organization in Africa who they'll be getting reactive funding. This has to do with being there. And I know that I'm not naive. I know you guys are struggling with funds, but whatever opportunity there is for you to be in the room, right, for you to be in the space with a funder, with somebody who can make decisions and get to know them, and to establish a connection, a relationship, whether it's during the meeting, whether it's after hours. It sounds silly, but it's actually one of the easiest things to get that proactive funder. Ruth Levine, who used to run the Global Development Program at the Hewlett Foundation, would tell all of us, raise friends before raising funds. The other one is cultivate your own, and I can talk more about this. I've been in this sector for 15 years, and probably 6-7 years before, also working with think tanks. Time passes. I mean, it's been more than 20 years since I started. IDRC funded the Think Tank Initiative, which was 10-11 years of core funding for think tanks. And I remember that at the beginning, the Think Tank Initiative, there were conversations around how do we mobilize domestic funds so that those think tanks supported by the Think Tank Initiative, at the end of the initiative, 10 years later, will not be dependent on IDRC or foreign sources. But time passed, a year went by, another year went by, and think tanks only started to work together to try to address this issue in year 8 or year 9. But, it was too late. Right, so time will pass. So the sooner you start building your own, whether it's through inviting potential philanthropists, young people with money now into these events, into these spaces, trying to influence government policy around the enabling environment for local philanthropy, whatever you can do is great. And then one more thing. African think tanks, Central African think tanks, again, thinking about global funders, but also those prospective, new, local, sort of private funders here. By and large, communications is lagging behind the rest of the world in terms of what think tanks do in terms of communications. There are a few think tanks that are very good in their investment in their communications, in their sort of proactive communication towards their audiences and the rest of the world. And they get most of the attention. So I think investing in communications is critical for any think tank that wants to get in the room, right? Build that connection, and change the power dynamics with their funder. It will make a huge difference to what you are doing. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Well, thank you very much, Enrique, for that overview. I mean, you mentioned something there which I wanted to just make a quick comment, because when we talked with our partners and started to bring think tanks in the Central Africa region, the goal was, as you said, try to talk with partners and funders, and when any opportunity you have to talk with them, getting to know them, you should seize. But we realized that there is this very in Francophone, our culture is very different, because I'll tell you that there were at least 3 funders who were very worried about coming to the forum, because they were like, Dennis, how are we going to be bombarded by would people be pitching to us? Because guess what? When they go to East Africa and they're in a conference, they receive a lot of pitching during those conferences. When they go to West Africa, they receive a lot of pitching. Yeah. So I told them, no, don't worry, we'll be fine or so, right? I'm talking about what happened here 2 years ago. The first day finished. Towards the end of the second day of the conference, one of the funders came to me and said, Dennis, is it because of me that I'm a woman that nobody's talking to me? And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, are they pitching to the other men there or so? Because nobody has pitched to me. I'm like, really? Nobody has pitched to you? So I went to the other men, the 2 men who were also funders. I said, hey, come, let's talk. How many people have pitched to you? It's like, nobody has pitched to me. Both of them had not received any pitches at all.
Yeah.
And it became very clear that there is a cultural thing that we needed to work on regarding how you network, especially in Central Africa and in Francophone Central Africa, because even in Francophone West Africa, it's now much more common. But in East Africa, whenever they have the opportunity, they go from there. So have you experienced that, just briefly before I come to Wilson?
Yes, we advise many think tanks in helping them think about their business development strategy. We don't find you a funder, but we advise on how to do it, and we write about this all the time. And I'm always very surprised at the number of times that think tank leaders will say, I'm not getting the money, but when you ask them, who have you spoken to? The list is very, very short, right? So in general, I think most think tank leaders did not plan to be think tank leaders. Most think tank leaders were researchers, and at some point they were senior enough and became think tank leaders. And so they're not necessarily thinking about the skills and the competencies they need to run an organization, which is, it's a business, right? Just maybe not for profit, but it's a business. And so maybe the attitude, the approach is not there, but it's true. People are afraid of the no, but you need to get used to people telling you no, not now. I can tell a very nice story at some point about a think tank in Argentina, CIPEC, and how they build their own network and community of funders over the 20 so years they have, which is quite enlightening.
We'll come to that. Now, please get ready for questions. So if you have questions, I'll have Dr. Yeton here. To talk a little bit, Dr. Yeton, regarding the challenges that you have faced, and also the approach that you've seen researchers in Cameroon take in their quest for funding.
Yeah.
And then I'll come to you all with Q&A.
Yeah, there are a litany of challenges that the researchers in Cameroon are facing. And the first is we have an unenabling environment. Yeah. The environment is very unenabling when we look at the legislative framework that is in place, lack of human capacity building, infrastructure, and all of that. And to put the finger on the point, the Minister of Scientific Research has come out with a slogan, one researcher, one enterprise. But then, looking at the reality of that, in between is a whole complexity, which it brings us back. I want to come back to what Professor Pondi said yesterday. I'm a very open person. I don't see how that slogan can work in Cameroon. That is the truth about it. And there is this issue now on the national strategy of Cameroon talking about import substitution, which is becoming another thing on the table. Each time they ask us researchers, how are we going to contribute? The last time as a fellow of the Cameroon Academy of Sciences, which is another small think tank, we had a workshop at Montfebe, and they asked me to give a keynote on this issue of water and energy nexus. And it happened that the president of the Nigerian Academy of Sciences was there, that for Senegal was there, that for Ghana was there, and I told them that I'm asking them a simple question. They should give me a sincere response. We're talking about import substitution. Is NEPA in Nigeria providing enough energy for industrialization to take place to have import substitution? The government of Nigeria said no. We are seated here, in the next second this light can go off. So we are putting the chariot in front of the horse. Why don't we have an enabling environment? If I want to list them here, I think we're going to end tomorrow. So this is just a kind of the eyebrow, opener to the challenges we are facing. We deal in an environment which is not realistic. We deal in an environment which is not based on evidence-based research for development, where development is fostered by political slogans. So we generate our research data, which are very good, but we use them just to grow. Like now they call me the chief research officer, or the Frenchman will say director of research, because of my publications. But then these publications, which have data that can be transformed to useful transformation for development, they are great data. They are not used by our politicians, but it is recognized more outside. They call me all the time to come and give a talk on this publication and all of that. So the second thing, we need mental hygiene in our environment against what I say corruption, because it goes now to this issue of financing. After having an enabling environment, we need a mental hygiene, and then we need to become reliable and credible. When we become reliable and credible, then we identify all the actors or the stakeholders that are playing this game, and we bring them together. Because you go now to the Ministry of Public Works, you go to all the ministries that are doing research, they want to generate data. We need to mutualize all these forces together, and then we look for a way to become autonomous.
So, Dr. Yeja, let me just ask one question that has been bothering me. Within the ministry, within MINRESI, or is there a specific budget that is for research? I know at the universities or so, there is some kind of researchers receive some kind of a stipend, but is there a budget for research in the country?
Yeah,
line for research in the
yes, I will answer that question by giving you the organigram of the ministry. The ministry has 7 operational institutions. You must have known of IRAT, IRGM, MIPROMALO, that does with construction material. You have IMPM, that does with medical plants. So there are 7 of these institutions. So when the ministry will definitely be sending some money to each of these institutions for, planned research activities. But before I go into that, I want to say that there is no adopted strategic plan for the Ministry of Scientific Research. They don't have a shopping bag, So, and this amount they give to these operational institutions are just Mickey Mouse amount that most of the time they end up using it in doing administrative activities. So when a researcher asks for money to go out on the field, he said, there is no money. I will give you an example. I am a hydrologist, and we need to go out every year to evaluate the quantity and quality of water resources we have in Cameroon. But the last time I went out on the field to do this activity for the area that I cover was in 2015.
All right. That was 10 years ago. Well, let's start with some questions, to get the audience. So we have regarding challenges in financing. I'll come with the first table in front of me, and then I have a gentleman here with my nice green agbada as a second, and then we'll go to the table behind with Jim first. So this side is very strong. I'm sorry for this side. And Romaric needs to pass somebody else. He needs to force somebody else to ask the question. All right, let me start with the first table here.
Okay, good morning. My name is Minen Pongwe. I'm a researcher. So my question, I have two questions, and I intend to ask them to Dr. Mari. First, I wish to know if you fund individual or independent researchers. And secondly, I wish to know how an individual can attract philanthropy or funding, especially if they are researching on an evidence-based issue, but that is not in line with your different pillars, because you made mention of the fact that you have, I think, 4 or 5 pillars. So that is my worry. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the second question.
Ok, merci pour la parole donnée. Et enfin, j'ai eu la parole parce que depuis hier, j'essaie de prendre la parole.
Oh,
et je me rends compte que pour prendre la parole, il faut être sur la première étape. Bon, c'est une remarque que je voulais aussi faire. Moi, c'est M. Bachirou Njoya. Je représente la Fondation Princesse Maman Rabiatou Njoya, qui est une ONG accréditée à l'UNESCO. Et nous travaillons sur un projet qui se présente comme une forme de think tank. Et nous avons recruté des pôles d'auditeurs libres et indépendants qui travaillent sur des questions de gouvernance du patrimoine culturel immatériel dans le contexte de la décentralisation. Nous travaillons avec certains experts africains et occidentaux, mais je vais essayer de faire part de notre retour d'expérience en termes
What's your question?
de financement. Oui, je veux faire un retour d'expérience en termes de financement et poser la question.
Oui, merci.
C'est que nous avons eu des difficultés à capter de financement pour financer nos projets et on s'est rendu compte que le goulot d'étranglement c'est au niveau institutionnel parce que le peu de financement que l'UNESCO pourrait nous accorder à travers notre accréditation est conditionné parfois par des accords institutionnels qui n'arrivent généralement pas. Et maintenant, je voulais poser la question de savoir comment faire dans ce genre de contexte où les opportunités d'obtenir de financement sont parfois bloquées au niveau institutionnel. Ça, c'est la question que je voulais poser. Et je pourrais revenir plus tard avec d'autres questions. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for that. Institutional challenges in getting finance. The table behind you, I think, is question.
Thank you very much. I am Jim Chik Fomunjong. I work for the West Africa Civil Society Institute, which is based in Accra, Ghana. Dr. Wilson, my first question is addressed to you. What avenues or opportunities for engagement do exist for think tanks, to either collaborate with you or accompany you to ensure that the agenda of promoting an initiative of mobilizing resources locally to champion research in this country? What opportunities do exist? Dr. Marie, my next question is addressed to you, and I was particularly pleased to learn that you are one of the few partners who champions an effort to direct resources specifically to organizations in our part of the world. Now, my question is, how can think tanks in the sub-region or in the region or the country Cameroon accompany you in this agenda to ensure that we influence more donors to be more aware of that obligation to promote the localization agenda, whereby, you know, a specific quota of development aid needs to come directly to our institutions in this part of the world? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The next round, I hope people from this side will be ready. But Dr. Marie-Glorious, we had, I think, 2 questions at least that were directed to you, and one, and then I'll come and I'll have Kiki, I'll have you also talk on the institutional challenges. So.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks for your questions. So the first one was about funding individuals. So yeah, no, IDRC overall really has agreements with institutions. And the idea here is that we want, through the collaboration, take also opportunity to strengthen those organizations. And it means not only internal technical capacity, so then it comes to the individual collaboration, but also beyond technical capacity to think about really grant management. And it's something that probably relates to some of the questions around how to attract funding, because really funders are also looking, and we've been talking about issues around corruption here in the region, etc., but looking at really legitimate, credible institutions, so that also the administrative and financial management is really something that can be taken into account in the process. And the second part of your question, if there are no alignment, yes, unfortunately, I guess funders have to make those decisions in terms of what to fund. In our case, I shared with you the fact that we did that consultation to identify, given limited resources. But at the same time, it doesn't preclude organization, think tanks, to approach donors with new ideas. There are, it's not, everything is not done by call for proposals. There are things that, if they are emerging, you can bring to the attention of the funders. We are really even now supporting what we call foresight analysis. What may the future look like, so that we are ahead of the curve? And that's what also I encourage actually the think tanks to do, not only to be reactive addressing the current issues, but to really think ahead and say what may be the issues that will be coming, and how can we actually position ourselves to be the one, the best interlocutor for the funders. So that's what I could say. Maybe I'll go for, and then I'll come back for the last question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I mean, I want to say, just to highlight a little bit what you said, Dr. Ingebari, that from CAFU in particular, I mean, even with IDRC, we've been lucky to have at least 2 major grants with IDRC, but they have not been called for proposals.
Mm-hmm.
They've not come out of call for proposals. It's come out of conversations that we've had with the IDRC team. So I think, yes, just to at least say the call for proposals are there, but for us, we've actually, it's been more conversations and with other partners as well. Mm-hmm. Most of our other partners have also been from conversations rather than call for proposals. So, Kike, let me have you talk about institutional challenges. Then there are some very pertinent questions here for Mr. Yeto.
Sure, thank you. I will address that, but since I don't think any question was addressed at me directly, I'll take advantage and dip my foot in others. I'll say that I'll agree that IDRC is one of the better research funders, and certainly one of the better think tank funders. But IDRC is limited by the rules that set it up, right? And it's limited, has limitations. And I think every funder has limitations. And one of the things I think addressing the issue of individual versus organizational funding, addressing the issue of options around institutional funding, you need to know your funders beyond just, oh, they are a funder that works in this part of the world and funds these issues. You need to understand why they fund some things and why they don't fund some things. Right? It's often not because they don't want to, it's because the rules that set them up and then run them and govern them and the powers that be, that they have to report to, demand certain conditions. So I think I agree. You can always try to influence them. But I want to emphasize when most think tanks in the global south, most think tanks in lower and middle income countries are facing the same challenges. It's really hard to get funding from global funders unless they already know you, unless you are sort of their preferred grantee or the preferred partner. Making your way is very hard. You always hear stories, but there are just small numbers. Like the American dream, right? We all think we can get it, but it's only one or two that become billionaires or millionaires. So I do want to use this opportunity to emphasize the idea of collective action in different ways. Collective action in mobilizing domestic funders. Domestic funders everywhere in the world are much less demanding of types of organizational setups, of levels of compliance. They're much less demanding of monitoring, evaluation frameworks because they are in this community. They are Cameroonians like you, they read the same newspapers, they go to the same spaces, they're interested in the same policies. And therefore they will know that you're influential, they will know that you're doing a good job, they will know you're credible, you're trustworthy, because they're connected to you. Cameroon, like Peru, like other countries, there are not that many degrees of separation between us, right? If you are in the space of public policy, you will be connected, one or two steps, to policymakers, to business leaders, to NGO leaders, you will be connected, they will know. So already there, all the institutional barriers or the restrictions, all the incredible cost involved in reporting goes down. So it's not going to happen now, but it's worth investing in it. But it's certainly not done by one organization. It has to be done collectively. And the other thing I would say is that while you're doing this, play your international funders. Again, collective action. Everywhere we go, think tanks complain that the funders come with their agendas and tell them what they want to fund, even if that's not the most important thing in their country. But what happens is that most think tanks, what they do is that individually, they still pitch. They still send the proposal. They'll still try to get that project. I was talking to you the other day, sort of a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but I do think, because I've talked to other funders, that if the think tank community of Cameroon said to external funders, thank you but no, we will not engage in these programs because these are not priorities for Cameroon. The priorities for Cameroon are these 3 or these 4. This is what we want you to fund. I think many funders would struggle a little bit, but they will change their agenda because it will look really bad when they go back home, to their bosses and to their civil society, if they'd said, we did not listen to the Cameroonian think tank community, and we went ahead and we told them, but you still have to study this. So I think collective action is crucial if we want to change this situation. But it's critical that you really spend time and invest time in knowing your funders, knowing the funders that you have or that you want to have.
And can you just talk about the CPEC example? Because the Argentinian example is very unique.
CPEC is a think tank in Argentina, and it's a very good example of a think tank that has, in a context that it's a little bit better than most countries because there is domestic funding, but when they started there wasn't much. What the funders did at the beginning is they went around Argentinian business community presenting the think tank. And they were trying to speak to that audience right from the start. And they would present the think tank, and then they would say, introduce me to 3 people in your community that might be interested of hearing what we want to do. So in about a couple of years as they were starting, they met everybody that could potentially fund them in Argentina, so local funders. And early on, they started something which is now an amazing event, which is an annual dinner where they sell the tables to the business leaders. And they sit business leaders with NGO leaders, with think tankers, in each table. And it took them a while. They had a dinner for the diaspora, Argentinians all over the world. They had a dinner for local business leaders. Now, that dinner accounts for 30% of their budget. And it's free money. They can do whatever they want with that money. They can study whatever they want to study. They can build whatever capacity they want to build. It's not set by any international funder. But CIPEC is about 20, 25 years old, right? So you've got to start at some point. And then sometime down the line, you will get there.
Yes, no, thank you. Je vais prendre l'opportunité de répondre à la question qui m'était posée. So it was about how actually support think tank to be more visible and attract direct funding. So, it's true, funders talk to each other. They share notes, they talk about their research partners, think tanks, and who are performing. And it's true, talking about, Dr. Dennis was talking about the particularity of the region. It's true that in the Central Africa region, funders are struggling. And often it's not because they don't want to fund activities or research in the region, but they don't know who to fund, who are the credible organizations to support. So one of the things that I think is really quite good is what you started with the Nkafu Policy Institute, this network and coming together, because it's great to have when either calls or collaboration, as was mentioned, to say, yeah, you know what, you want to work in the region, here's a network that we have. And connection in Chad, connections in Gabon, connection Central African Republic, etc. So that's a way of also attracting. One other thing is really make your work visible. A couple of days we were meeting with also other partners here from DRC, as well as the Canadian High Commission. And one of the colleagues at the Canadian High Commission was like, wow, Nkafu Policy Institute, all things you're putting out there, we're reading, we're enjoying it, we're sharing it among our diplomatic community to understand what's going on. Trust me, those are also ways of attracting funding. When we talk to them, where there are projects, they say, you know what, we know this organization and that organization. And even if at the end of the day we come, Nkafu Policy Institute is a solid one, but we know that there is at least a potential, then the idea is how do we work with you to really continue and get where you need to be. So just last point I want to touch upon is about the ecosystem that was mentioned. It's true, supporting research project alone is not sufficient if you're not actually supporting the whole research ecosystem in the country. We're trying with the initiative that called Science Granting Council Initiatives, where we're looking at research councils in the countries to see first, how can you develop your research agenda? It's easy, actually funders are looking at what are the research agendas of countries. It would be so easy than sitting and trying to figure out So if that happens, not only they're all feeding into the priorities of the country, but at the same time, we're also allowing those research councils to actually fund directly research in their countries. And it's happening now in about 11 African countries. We'll be meeting in Ghana next month. Will be 2 more countries that will be added. And the idea is really actually support them. And those are government institutions. And then providing them also with funding for them to do their own call for proposal and engage. So I know we would work to have that 1% at least that was mentioned of the GDP invested in research. I hope those institutions can develop strategic plan and priorities for research in countries, and I think then funders will actually have a easier job, I would say, to really contribute. But that's what we want. That's what I want to mention.
Thank you so much. Let me come to you, Dr. Wilson.
Yeah.
There was a very direct question to you.
Yeah, I want to address it.
Okay,
first.
great.
All right. I want to thank you so much for your very, brain-working question, which I will try to address. The opportunities, they exist. And the first opportunity is in the hope that we saw countries like Singapore and South Korea getting out of this kind of environment that we find ourselves in and picking up so fast. So if we do some benchmarking, it's not because we are where we are that we can't get to the change that we want to get to. So that is the hope first that I want to bring to your mind. And then the first opportunity that comes in here is in our culture. The culture in Africa is that of what? Community, right? When you go out there, they tell you, now out there you have isolation, but in Africa we have community life. If you translate that to research, it means it is what? It is an opportunity for multidisciplinary research to be done. Because the tendency we have in Africa, when I teach in universities and I go around, I tell students, when you have an idea, right, share with your neighbor. But because each student wants to have an A grade for him or herself, he doesn't want to share, forgetting to know that sharing is gaining. So we need to break our boundaries and then work together. That's the second thing. The third thing is, the person who sat on this position yesterday, during the first plenary, made a very important, statement that the most important resource that is being exported out of Africa is what? It's our brain. And we have the knowledge. So that's an opportunity that we have. It is a massive opportunity that we just need to harness in the right direction and in the right time. The fourth is that all is not, black. In MINRESI now, we are putting in place, we are elaborating the research agenda, the research strategy, and we are planning now to go in for the, evaluation and adopt it. And I think if that comes out, it's going to really level the playground for many Cameroonians to do friendly, research. Again, we don't call Cameroon le continent for nothing.
We're not doing anything.
Yeah. There is it's an opportunity from north down to south. It gives a playground for researchers to carry out research. You have enormous area that gives you all the facts that you need to write a very good research proposal that can convince any funder. And then we also have a vibrant youth population, as we saw in the presentation yesterday. Then the institutional framework for MINRESI, as I said, we have, MINRESI has like 7 baskets. IRGM, IRAD, IMPM, the National Educational Center, you know, we have 7 of them. And even if the baskets are not yet full, as we are crying here today, it is an opportunity for those baskets to be filled with ideas. So that is an existing opportunity, because the way this organigram in MINRESI was put in place after independence, it is from these institutions that all the ministries are fed with technical information to run the development of the country. So we just need to reorganize this, make use of them the way, you know, they were envisaged, and then we tap from the opportunities. The last, please, Chair, let me just give the last point.
Okay.
You know, last year, 2 years ago in 2023, one of the oldest research statues that existed in the world, that is the Cameroon Research Status, which was put in place in 1980. And when I was recruited in 2002, we started clamoring for that status to be updated. In 2023, you know, the new status of researchers was signed, and it has motivated the research ecosystem in a way that you will not underestimate. And it's putting in a new energy of opportunities for anybody who wants to be a researcher in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are, you see, my colleague is saying, stop. You know, that's what they're saying. So, any final remarks on strengthening think tank? I'll give 1 minute each, and then we stop. So Muriel doesn't kill me afterwards. I'll start with you, Dr. Mary.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. No, it has been a great discussion. It's true, I mean, challenges are there, but there are also, I think, opportunities. That's what we have to keep in mind. And these opportunities where we come together, and thanks again to Nkafu Policy Institute, are opportunity to learn from each other, to share, but also to create those partnerships that will benefit us. So it's true, you were talking about funders who haven't been probably approached, maybe because I haven't been approached for an year either, but maybe I shouldn't have said to now the rest of the day, but it's okay. It's okay because we also want to hear, again, in the interest of supporting what is a priority in different contexts, to hear those ideas as well, to see if we can support them or not, or if, as I was saying, we work with other funders, we discuss. Those are also opportunities to say, oh, you work on this and that, you know what, I received an idea that may interest you. So let's keep this discussion, this network, and continue to see what we can do to strengthen the research in Central Africa region.
Thank you so much. And the other thing there is that when you're talking with partners, funders, so at times we make a big mistake of wanting funding today rather than, you know, a conversation understanding where funding may not come today, maybe in 5 years, but they understand. I think that's on us, for us to have an understanding of the funder. Kike.
Thank you. I wanna sort of draw your attention again to what Marie Grillo said about the Science Granting Council initiative, which I think is a fantastic initiative. And I think is an excellent way of starting to mobilize domestic funding. And it'd be great if more international funders put money through these Science Granting Councils instead of having their own funding streams, right? It would certainly localize decision-making around who gets the funding. It would be much fairer and much more politically accountable. But that's a good example of something you can do if you get to know your funder. Because often the funder officer, right, the employee of the funder can't can't be aware of all the potential opportunities. So it's great if you can say, well, what about this? What about connecting this program with this program and that program in my context? So you're helping them to make connections that they need to make, but it's not always easy because they're not in the country day to day looking at those issues. Right? So I think that's the great thing is funders like IDRC that have multiple initiatives to support research can enhance that impact if you also think creatively about those connections. I've emphasized the issue of collective action many times. I want to make sure that's very clear. But I also want to encourage, in general, encourage think tanks to think how they're more visible. And I want to offer, on think tanks, as I said, is a space. We have a directory. It's called the Open Think Tank Directory, which you can log into. You can add your think tank's information, and it's much more easily searchable. Often people search for think tanks and they find the brief on our website. And we'll be more than happy to share information about your organizations. And there are other services online that we can share with you to help you be more visible. I think it is true, you have to be more visible. And if your funding is coming from abroad, unfortunately, you have to be more visible abroad, right? So where those funders are looking for information about Cameroon or about Ghana or about Gabon, whatever, you have to be present in those spaces. It's really on us, right, to get the funding.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you so much. I would just want to end my discourse here by saying that candidly, I appreciate the quality of the guys that are working here, which means they show a lot of passion. And why am I saying this? The passion is the key to being a good researcher. There are two domains of, jobs, which I say all the time. Being a university lecturer and being a researcher, you must have passion for this in order to break the boundaries. If you have to get to where this funding align anywhere, you need to have passion for research. And I think that is the encouraging word and directory word I want to give to these vibrant youths that are in here and to the think tanks that we look for people that have passion in order to break the boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you all. Please join me in thanking this wonderful panel for a very enlightening conversation. Thank you very much.